a little bit longer. It's called butter. It has to do with friends in a matter of speaking. We went to the Slotted Spoon and sat at our usual table. "I'd like to make some changes," she said, pushing aside the menu. "What, you want to go to the Rusty Scupper instead?" I said. That's not what I mean," she said, and took a sip of her drink. "Say, if you're not going to use those, let me have them," I said, pointing my knife at the butter on her bread plate. She turned her head and gazed out the window at the sea rolling against the rocks. I reached across the table for the butter and knocked over her martini. It spilled onto the red plate. The pats of butter looked like little yellow icebergs in a sea of gin, the olive like some sort of bathysphere. "Christ, Lenny," she said, "I'm not happy." "Don't worry, babe, we can get more." In keeping with the theme of Can We Still Be Friends, I'm going out on a limb here. This is an untested story, well, I'll just read it to you. It's about two friends, Donnie and Charles. It was Donnie's stoop, Donnie's house. Charles visited every summer. Their fathers had served together, kept in touch, and the boys spent the hot months swimming and playing cards and lying about girls, trying to one-up each other about the merits of their respective towns, their crummy ball teams. They were the same age and both wore glasses, still carried some baby fat, but Donnie felt superior to his friend, older somehow, more daring. They spat into the weeds. "Shit," said Donnie. "Yeah," said Charles. They'd had this conversation. The old ficus that grew near the stoop had, over the years, pushed its root under the sidewalk so that two abutting concrete slabs had buckled and were steepled. Pedestrians at the apex seemed to hover there like momentary gymnasts. Angie, a girl from the next block, approached. She was older than the boys, a junior in high school. Lost in thought, she didn't notice that Donnie and Charles had scooted off the stoop to lie in the grass near the tree, where they hoped for a view up her skirt, a view of thighs, of mystery. When she reached the buckled walk, the boys giggled and elbowed each other. They pretended to see something that was impossible to view from their low ankle. "What are you laughing at?" Angie said, looming over them, aware now of their presence. Charles blushed, but Donnie, in an attempt to seem worldly, to best his friend, said, "Oh, ignore her, man. She's just a whore." Though he had only a vague notion of what a whore might be. It was a word he'd heard his father use. "What did you say, you little shit weasel? You take it back or I'll kick your ass." The dark green Buick pulled to the curb and Donnie's face drained of color. He jumped up and ran into the house as Charles tried to hide behind a tree. Papa Bear was home. "Come back here, you little shit," Angie shouted. Papa Bear got out of the car slowly. He was tall and heavy. He cinched his belt and folded his arms over the roof of the car and let his eyes wander over Angie's geography before saying, "Is there a problem, miss?" "Yeah, that kid just called me a whore." "And?" said Papa Bear. "And? What a bunch of creeps," Angie said and walked off, her fists clenched. "Charles," the old man said, barely containing his anger. Charles peeked out from behind the tree. "Yes, sir?" "Did Donnie call her a whore?" Yeah, he did, sir." Papa Bear took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and walked through the gate and up the steps into the house. Charles followed as far as the porch where he sat on the rail and waited, smiling. Donnie was on the bed in his room pretending to read a comic book when Papa Bear walked in. "Get up, Donnie." "Hi, Pops, when did you get home?" Donnie said, and urged the corners of his mouth into the twitchy semblance of a smile. "Did you call a girl a name out there?" "No, Donnie began, but Papa Bear grabbed the front of his son's shirt and slapped the boy hard across the face, then pushed him onto the bed. Donnie rolled into a fetal curl and waited for the blows that came quickly, rhythmically. He covered his head with his arms and said, "Please don't hurt me, Pops, please don't hurt me." He could smell the old man's sweat. Donnie smiled, his face hidden. The pain was real, but somehow muted, as if delivered through many layers of felt, more like sound than feeling, like thuds. He felt cocooned. There was something comical about the scene. The boy crying out, playing at someone in agony, while the big man grew tired, his face bright red, his arms heavy. Donnie ascended to the ceiling and looked down on Papa Bear. Using his cranium cutter, he opened his father's skull as if it were a can of tuna, then plunged his arm into the opening, past the glistening brain, through the throat and into the chest. He moved aside the lungs that hung like shirts in a closet and groped about until he found the heart. He wrapped his fingers around it and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until jets of whiskey spurted from the old man's nose. Papa Bear stopped beating his son and, while backing toward the door, hit his head on the doorframe. He turned and staggered down the hall to the living room, where he dropped onto the couch. After taking several deep breaths, he reached for the remote control and turned on a football game. He touched his bruised head. Donnie's mother entered the living room from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. "What's all the racket about? You hitting him again?" she said. "I was teaching him something," Papa Bear said. They'd had this conversation before. Donnie rose from the bed and quietly closed the door, then opened his window, climbed through and dropped to the yard and walked around the house to the porch. He climbed the steps. Charles pointed at Donnie's face, at the blood on his lips and cut cheeks. Donnie touched his face and smiled at the blood on his fingers. "Shit," he said. "Yeah," said Charles.